Okay, hi everyone. This is Maryam Henein. I am an investigative journalist, functional medicine consultant, best known for directing the film Vanishing of the Bees. And I've been covering techno-fascism and censorship. And I have the honor to be with Ryan Hartwig, who is a Facebook whistleblower who first came out on Project Veritas. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Maryam, and it's a pleasure to be here. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's been about 4 weeks since the video came out with Project Veritas. But yeah, I'm glad to be on your show.
Thank you. So has it changed your life? Are you doing interviews every day now?
Yeah, it's been a dramatic change in my life. I had a job, so the job I had with Cognizant with Facebook ended in
Yes.
February. So I
Okay.
had a full-time job that I'd been at since March, and I actually quit that job just to make time to do interviews and whatnot. So yeah, I've been unemployed for about 3 weeks. Been very busy doing interviews. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So let's take a step back and talk about Cognizant for people who don't know what that is. And you
hmm
were a content moderator,
hmm
also known as a process executive, is what they call it, right? So
hmm
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was a process executive, content moderator for Cognizant. So we were contracted by Facebook to do content moderation. So what's curious is, after 2016, Facebook moved a lot of those jobs, those content moderation jobs, and they actually moved and hired people in the United States. So
Hmm.
prior to 2016, 2017, there weren't that many U.S. based content moderators.
Where
So
were they?
I'm not sure where they were. It might have been India or they were outsourcing it to different countries. But obviously, U.S. based employees have better knowledge of local politics.
Of course.
Um, so my journey began in March of 2018 with when I got hired as a content moderator for Cognizant and directly doing content moderation for Facebook. So you have March 2018. So I was there for just under 2 years, and I saw a whole lot of different stuff. I was moderating for a while. I was moderating in Latin America, and
Hmm.
for the first year and a half, and then I got transferred to the North American queue. But the entire time, I still had access to the North American queues and guidance. Um, so yeah, in the video that came out about a month ago with Project Veritas, it highlights how I was targeted because I was conservative and because I was white. And so, I filmed under with a hidden camera for many months to, reveal a lot of the documents you see in the video.
Facebook favors the left.
They do, 100%. We work with a lot of liberals. Yeah. I would go in there with a MAGA shirt or a MAGA hat, I'd get my ass beat.
So I saw some discrepancies. I saw some evidence of bias.
You're saying because he's a white male. Oh, it's easier when they're
White man. No one has the white man's back anymore.
We bring the game to it could work on the left side.
I saw more blatant posts against Trump.
But Facebook obviously hates Trump. Yes, 100%. They do.
I saw an alarming number of posts that really focused on conservatives, kind of a double standard.
So I've spent quite a bit of time looking at pictures of hate organizations, Hitler, Nazis, MAGA, Proud Boys, all that stuff all day long.
But there are some things that were not in the video, and as well.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the summary of it. I was there for just under 2 years. I deleted posts, comments, videos. I dealt with groups and pages as well. So a wide variety of things.
So Cognizant does other stuff. Is it hired by other social media platforms to specifically do content moderation? Is that what they're known for?
No, Cognizant's a Fortune 200 company, so their biggest competitor is Cisco. So they do a lot of IT work in the banking and healthcare industry. So actually, this foray into content moderation was kind of an outlier for them. And generally, they hire more, highly skilled engineers for, IoT and cloud IT, that sort of thing. So they have a lot of employees in India. I think they have over like 200,000 employees worldwide. So a very large company. But yeah, this content moderation project was kind of weird, unique for them. But it was a very lucrative project for them. So I think the three-year contract I think was worth $200 million or something like that.
Wow, are they still doing content moderation for Facebook?
So they Cognizant canceled the I'm gonna lean back here.
Yeah, lean back.
Kind of relax a little bit.
Yes.
So the Cognizant canceled the contract prematurely. Okay. And so they no longer do content moderation. They might be working on some projects with AI with Facebook, with their engineers, but they no longer do content moderation. There's a few other companies in the US that do it, but not Cognizant anymore.
So let's say, okay, it's 2018, you get this gig, for lack of a better word. They give you some guidelines, like they gave you this election kind of manual. Can you take us through the process of slowly kind of realizing that they are biased? And were you a conservative beforehand?
So yes, let me kind of walk you through that process. So I have been conservative throughout my life. I tend to be a little bit libertarian as well. So going into it, I didn't know what to expect, because when you interview for, you don't know that it's Facebook. So I grew up conservative. I've always been kind of conservative libertarian.
So as you answer me, obviously it wasn't a problem to hire you as a conservative. Did they ask you?
So yeah, when I first got hired, they did not, ask me about whether I was conservative or not. They looked at my qualifications. And I think maybe that's why Facebook does this third party, so they can insulate themselves from any decisions they have to make. Now, what's fascinating is 3 months after I got hired, they made all the employees link their personal Facebook account to their work account in order to continue working on content. So you had to do it. It was mandatory.
So they're moderating the moderators.
Well, they said it was in the name of, they said it was for privacy reasons. So they said you had to link your personal Facebook account so that you didn't mistakenly action your friend's content. So I don't know if I believe that or not, but they could very easily check and see what kind of, if you're conservative or liberal, if you're linking your account. So that was a little bit weird. But yeah, in my training class, my trainer, Perla, she was very openly liberal and open about her love for President Obama. So she said that Obama was her patronus charm. So that's something that's pretty fascinating. So from the very beginning, it was a little bit weird, because I was like, okay, what am I getting into? So yeah, over 2 years, I documented quite a few examples. After a year, so in May of 2019, I had about 19 examples of bias that I documented and noticed. And I wrote a letter to my congressman and a couple senators, and I didn't hear back anything. And so that's when I reached out to Project Veritas. Did you ever bring it up to Facebook or your colleagues? Like, hey, there's something off here. There was a couple of conversations maybe I had with coworkers, but the directives, the policy was designed by Facebook. So we treated them differentially. They're the client. So the attitude overall for anything was, hey, they're the client, we do what they say. And Facebook was very picky, even insofar as telling us what we should do for our interior design, how the table should be arranged. So they are a very demanding client. But yeah, that's the attitude. We did give them feedback on some policies, but at the end of the day, they have the final word, and they decide what goes and what the policy is.
What let's say if I just break to say, like, I considered myself a Democrat, but as I started seeing the overwhelming hate towards Orange Man, and also the censorship by Google for my own company, and that's what, there's a walk away movement. And then I saw how the conservatives were very welcoming, and that they're the ones who are actually standing up for our constitutional rights. So just, it's interesting that you were a conservative and still are. although they're not Democrats. So
Yeah.
what was the first? Do you recall the first incident of like, this is a little bit bias?
Yeah, there was an example in the summer of 2018 that I'll mention right now, and that's really a great point that you made, because I think this issue is larger than just conservative or liberal, because I interviewed with Karlin Borisenko last week, and she also used to be a lifelong Democrat, and she switched.
One of the things that I noticed after I went to the Trump rally and then ultimately, decided to vote for Trump after being a Democrat for 20 years.
And so think about it this way. I mean, if right now conservatives are being censored, 10 years from now, roles could be reversed. It could be the people on the left being censored. So depending on who has the power at any given time, this shouldn't be happening in any civic democratic society. Yeah.
Correct.
So the first example I saw in summer of 2018 was there was a teenager in Texas, and there was this viral video. This teenager was being attacked, and somebody knocked his hat off. He had a MAGA Trump hat.
President, you ain't support. It's gonna go great in my really.
So it was a viral video, millions of views, and Facebook knew that it was popular, and it showed a Trump supporter being victimized. And so they said, hey, in this video, the adult is cursing at the minor, so we're going to delete any instances of this video. So that was something that kind of threw me off, that I kind of noticed was kind of weird, because it was trending, it was viral, and once again, it's showing the Trump supporter being victimized. So that's one example, and then they came out with these newsworthy exceptions. So a counterexample is there's a senator in Australia named Fraser Anning, and he was giving a speech in public, or he was in a public setting, and a kid walked up and cracked an egg on the back of his head. And so you see a right-wing senator getting attacked, but the senator turned around and slapped the kid in the face a couple times. He slapped the kid in the head. So that became a violation of our child abuse policy. So that video was violating per Facebook's own child abuse policy, because he repeatedly slapped the kid in the head. Now Facebook saw this video. They knew that it violated their policy, but they said, we're making a newsworthy exception to allow this video. So at the sake of allowing child abuse on their platform, they're willing to push their political agenda.
So in this case, would you flag that as child abuse, and then you're parlaying, interacting with a core group at Facebook that has the final say?
Yeah, so we would get directives. We had kind of an internal message board. So we would get a chat from, so if we saw it over and over and over again, we'd raise it up to our supervisors, and then our policy manager would reach out to Facebook and say, hey, this video is trending. What do you want us to do about it? And then at that point, Facebook would get back to us, and they'd say, and we would get a post in our internal chat to all the content moderators. So at our site in Phoenix, there was roughly 1,000 content moderators. And so we would get the word, and so everyone would have to do it that way. So yeah, so that was kind of the process.
A thousand in total, or they're just in your branch?
So at the Phoenix site, I would say there was roughly about 1,000. There was a night shift, there was a morning shift, an afternoon shift. It was 24/7. It was a 24/7 operation. So there was the Phoenix site, and then Cognizant also had a location in Tampa with roughly the same amount of employees. And just give you an idea of the scale of this. So if I'm looking at jobs, I get one job on my screen at a time. It could be a post, it could be a comment. So I can choose on the hierarchy, if this is allowed on the platform, so I can ignore it and allow it on the platform if there's no violation. Or if it violates, I choose the category. So if it violates for hate speech, I click on hate speech, and it's very detailed. Why exactly is it violating? Or if it's violating for pornography or violence. So I would do about 200 of those a day. And so that's roughly 1,000 a week. So if you multiply that by however many employees, that's quite a lot of material that gets taken down. Yeah.
Yes. And were there other of your colleagues that enjoyed just power tripping? Because I think there's a lot, like at least on Twitter, where I'm very shadow banned, I imagine these power trippers that are just enjoying, like they just on Dr. Robert Epstein, sorry, I asked him, did you unfollow me? And he's like, no, I never did. And he, I just lost a whole bunch of people, and I'm assuming the moderators are getting their kicks doing this.
Yeah, I mean, some of my coworkers are on video, in the video that came out, talking about how they love to delete Trump posts and MAGA, and one of my coworkers was openly talking about how Trump supporters are a bunch of effing rednecks.
Today, a bunch of rednecks threatening civil wars. They remove our duly elected president.
So it's something that I think people don't realize how much power they wield. And another coworker in the video was talking openly about how she would have accepted the $80 million bounty from Iran to assassinate Trump.
It's inhumane. It's inhumane, but if it's gonna save the country, why not do it? I feel like $80 million would do a lot of good for the U.S. instead right now. I'm just saying. We should just hand them over. Take the money as a country. That's what I'm saying. If we hand him over, our country would be safe. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean it's a bargain, right?
You're talking about them coming, like them coming here.
I'm just saying, take him. Y'all can keep your 80 million, or you can give it to us and we can put it in our debt. Like, just you're saving the U.S. Like, come on. Yeah, that's it. They just want one person. Why not take one for the team?
So I mean, and she got mad because the video came out and she was getting some death threats. Now, I don't advocate for death threats against anybody, but I mean, it just, I mean, with that kind of job, if you're deleting things in the public discourse, there should be a certain level of transparency. There should be, content moderators should be in a kind of a fishbowl where the American public can see what's going on, and that's what this video revealed, is what's going on behind closed doors at Facebook.
You were covering undercover for how long?
I mean, I will say that I filmed with a hidden camera for many months. Yes. I initially reached out to Project Veritas in about June of 2019. So yeah, I know the last couple of months I was there, I was definitely filming continuously, almost on a daily basis. So as you can imagine, there's a lot that was not in the video release. And something I do want to point out, because you were asking about, what bothered me, what got to me. And people always ask me, well, what you get on your screen, is that random? Like, do you just get a random post in front of you? But the answer is kind of scary, because they can choose what gets in our queue. So when Greta Thunberg was trending and people were calling her retarded, Facebook didn't like that, I guess. And so what they can do, they can take their classifiers, they can do what's called a proactive pull, and they can inject violating hashtags into our queue. So they did that with hashtag retarded. So we got all day, we were getting jobs mentioning retarded, and we had to delete those. So for someone to say that's random and that they don't, they treat everyone equally, that's not the case.
No, that's not the case. So what was the kind of final straw for you to reach out to Project Veritas? And was it seeing other whistleblowers like Zach instrumental?
My name is Zach Voorhees, and I was an employee at Google for 8 years. And the reason why I collected these documents was because I saw something dark and nefarious going on with the company. I felt that our entire election system was going to be compromised forever by this company that told the American public that it was not going to do any evil. And I saw that they were making really quick moves, not only in the documents, but also in the internal speeches that the executives were giving to the company, that they were intending to do that. They were intending to sculpt the information landscape so that they could create their own version of what was objectively true.
What made you turn to them? Because like just yesterday or the day before, I shared a post that Zach made, and he got the post got locked down, and instantly they started crapping on Project Veritas. And it's like, well, I've met James O'Keefe, I've seen his work. Have you? Like, where are you getting this idea that he's not legitimate when he's way more legitimate than the mainstream media?
Yeah, so I did when I was meeting with Project Veritas, they did mention, Robert Epstein. I did see the video by Zach, and that was actually very inspiring, because it's one thing to go public and put your face out there. Project Veritas did give me the option. They let me choose, hey, do you want to go stay in the shadows, or do you want to go public? And with Zach, I mean, I watched that video where he created that on Twitter, kind of a fail safe or whatever, if anything happened to him. But yeah, he was treated very harshly by Google. So yeah, and then the Robert Epstein, the fact that millions of votes were swayed or influenced by Google search results, that really struck me as really, really important.
It's just so ironic that these are supposed Democrats that are not acting democratic in any way.
Yeah,
they're being what I call techno-fascists.
Right. Yeah, no, this is true. So basically there's different memes. So if I'm talking about politics, I'm talking about immigration. Like in Canada, you had a lot of refugees going to Canada, taking advantage of Canadian kindness.
Yeah.
So one meme I have here that shows a photo of refugees, and it says, look closely at this photograph. Do these look like refugees, or are they opportunistic leeches coming to take advantage of Canadian kindness? So since it portrays refugees and it compares them to a leech, that violates the hate speech policy. But yet this is political speech because it's discussing immigration policy, right?
Yes.
But Facebook censors political speech in that regard because they classify this meme regarding immigration as hate speech. So that's one example. And then also, so it has the prominent candidates from this last election here: Andrew Scheer, Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau. And then it said, let's see here. Yeah, it basically said, be on the lookout for content targeting Jagmeet Singh because of his religion or whatnot. So yeah, French hate speech content targeting candidate Jagmeet Singh with dehumanizing comparison. So, I mean, as moderators, they're training us to look out for that stuff. So if we see something targeting a conservative, we might see it, but it won't be as, as readily, recognized or raised up, because they're only telling us to watch out for people on the left and protect them. So yeah, that's the Canadian angle.
Was it surprising that it permeates beyond, or I guess your territory was North America, so you weren't surprised that they're interested in Mexican elections or Canadian politics, or?
I mean, we know that Facebook's a global company, so we know there's users all across the world. Now, it just comes down to the basic question, like, why are they involved in a sovereign country's election process? I live in Arizona, and the rules here, the laws are very strict, and as it is in many other countries. For example, if I were to vote and get a I voted sticker, and I go to take that sticker, and I go to the sandwich shop, and the sandwich shop says, "Oh, great job, you voted today. Let me give you a free sandwich." The act of them giving me a sandwich violates state law. So if you look at it that way, like, why is this foreign company getting involved in the elections of so many other countries? And it even goes to Venezuela. I mean, Latin America, Peru. Yeah, it's incredible to see how involved they are.
So what was the kind of needle that, what's the saying? What was the linchpin that was like, I'm going to go, I've had enough, this is enough? And we can get into just basically having, it's blasphemy against Jesus. So can you speak about what was like the last straw?
Yeah, one of the last straws for me, I think, was just how they treat in general like nationalist movements. So in general, the media's try to portray the word nationalist as being openly racist, a racist term. But nationalism by itself is not racist. Now, white nationalism, black nationalism, if you put a race in front of it, then you might have to investigate and see that it's very likely that it is racist. But what got me was there was a nationalist protest at a library in Washington D.C. and it was nowhere in the comments that it mentioned that it was a white nationalist meeting. It was just a nationalist meeting, and so Facebook told us to delete that. And I just think any political movement like that, like a nationalist movement, shouldn't be targeted by Facebook. That's such a political sphere. It's such a political movement. For them to categorize any kind of nationalist movement automatically as racist, that's really what got to me. That's kind of the needle that broke the back. I think that's the phrase.
Yeah, the camel.
The camel that.
The straw that
broke the camel's back. There we go. Yeah, or you could say it was death by a million paper cuts, because there were so many instances of this bias that I saw that it just kind of finally reached a breaking point. Yeah.
Did you feel like you were a traitor against yourself in a way, like that you were, because you were going against your values at a certain point?
Yeah, I mean, I've always believed in being very honest and having integrity, and obviously I did sign a non-disclosure agreement with Cognizant. So there was at a certain point while I was filming, I did think about that. Like there is, and there was a cost to my coworkers. So, for example, if Cognizant had continued that project and hadn't ended it prematurely, let's say the video came out while they still had the contract, that would affect the jobs of many people. If Facebook decided, which in this case didn't apply, but if Facebook had decided to end the contract because of something I published, hundreds of people could be out of a job because of what I did. So there was a moral dilemma at a certain point, but I decided just like the American people needed to know what was going on. And
I meant more you deleting things that should not be deleted, and having to betray integrity in itself, or just the sole job that you had when you realized that it was super biased towards one side.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, and that's something that I struggled with on a daily basis, because they would tell us, you need to think with your head and not your heart. And so there were some things that I had to take down. Anything related to Tommy Robinson was instantly deleted. Even just if you just write the name Tommy Robinson, it gets taken down. And he's lumped together with literally in the same section of the policy as terrorist groups, as cartels, MS-13. So people like Tommy Robinson, Gavin McInnes, Faith Goldie in Canada, they are on a hate figure list. And not only does this prevent any posts supporting them, but it also allows any violent speech towards them. So if you say, let's go kill Tommy Robinson, that's allowed on the platform because of Facebook.
Tell people who he is, for people who don't know.
Yeah, so Tommy Robinson is a very vocal immigration advocate in the UK. So he's very outspoken against immigration to the UK from Middle Eastern countries. And the main premise, the main reasons for that is because of how that immigration changes the societal structure in the UK because of the values they bring. So many people would label him as a racist. He's an anti-immigration advocate. We can see now, I mean, in London, the crime rates are going up. It's difficult to, there's been an increase in stabbings, knife stabbings. So yeah, and that's the same problem we face in the US as well. As, hey, if you have this influx of immigration, it changes the fabric of your society.
Yeah.
So that's who Tommy Robinson is. So any mention of him, any praise, support, or representation of him is automatically taken down. So, I was there when they banned InfoWars. So the reason they banned InfoWars, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, I believe, banned him on the same day.
Yes.
And I think he was talking about how some of these mass shootings were hoaxes. So that was some of his ideas and
Sandy Hook,
theories.
that it was a false flag.
Yeah, so we had a specific policy that was created after the Parkland shooting in Florida that said you're not allowed to make any claim that these survivors were crisis actors. So we had a specific policy about that. So that's what kind of got to me as well. Just, it's so ironic because it's InfoWars, information wars, and you're literally, taking him off the platform. So yeah, there's just a lot of examples of that.
When I defended Alex, who I've watched, long time ago, he's done some excellent journalism. And when I defended Roseanne Barr, and they're like, "You're a Roseanne Barr fan?" No, I'm a freedom of speech fan. Roseanne today, you tomorrow. And now we're dropping like flies. And anyone who really would use discernment or your heart, as you say, would see Roseanne Barr is no more racist than you or I. You can get a sense of that. And look what happened. They voted her off the island. They voted Alex off the island. Now many of us are off the island. Can we talk a little bit about, I saw your interview with Sean of SGT Report, and he said they wouldn't do that, what they did to Jesus Christ, and you can get into it, to Muhammad, but I don't think they would do it towards anything Israel either, because anyone who dares to say anything critical is just dubbed an anti-Semite, which is not necessarily at all the case. So what did you see with JC, Jesus Christ?
So yeah, in the Spanish market especially, there was more memes mocking Jesus Christ and mocking Catholicism. So there were memes with Jesus on the cross that showed him in a sexual position, or actually receiving intercourse in a very lewd and pornographic cartoon imagery. So and so there's nothing that's allowed on the platform. But if you put a goat next to Muhammad and have a meme referencing anything sexual in nature, that's specifically mentioned as hate speech, mentioning a goat and Muhammad. So yeah, Jesus is not protected. And then Zionists have additional protection. So Zionists, and I think homeless people in general, have additional protections, along with people in the Philippines who are accused of being drug dealers. They have special protections.
Why homeless and Zionists? It seems like, obviously it's separate.
Yeah.
Give me an example of homeless. What do you mean?
I think that, so the protection for homeless people is, I believe, under the violence and incitement policy. So if you say I'm going to beat up all the homeless people, they allow that kind of speech on the platform. So it's mainly within the violence and incitement policy, which is the policy that protects people. If you say, hey, I'm going to go shoot this guy, or I'm going to go, or something more extreme or specific, like I'm going to go blow up the school tomorrow, or I'm going to beat up Maryam. If I say I'm going to beat up Maryam, I'm threatening violence with my words, then that gets taken down. And that's that same policy that Tommy Robinson and other hate figures are excluded from. So if I say I'm going to go kill Tommy Robinson, then that's allowed.
It's okay.
Yeah. So
why do you think, in regards to they're siding with Muhammad? I can understand Zionism or saying anything that they can dub anti-Semitic, but why Muhammad over Jesus?
That's a really good question. I don't know. You'd think that, well, overall, the media, I think it's just the way the things are trending in the U.S. In the schools, they're trying to push for the teaching of Islam, and something I want to make clear, Maryam, is I have a lot of friends who are Muslim.
Yeah.
And I've been to the mosque here in Tempe, Arizona. I've been to Friday prayer with some friends from college. And that's something else I got attacked for at work, is I shared a video, or a link rather, of me attending a protest after an attempted terrorist attack here in the U.S. So this was in 2015. This was 4 months after Charlie Hebdo. And I went to an anti-Islam protest outside of a mosque, a very peaceful protest. and I ended up on the cover of LA Times holding some cartoons that were drawn by Charlie Hebdo. And I got in trouble from HR. So in that video, if you go to Project Veritas on YouTube, you'll see that video.
AUP policy states that you cannot send or use Cognizant or client internal systems to send discriminatory, racial.
Was the LA Times one? The Los Angeles Times where it showed had an image of me during a protest in 2015?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was.
But you weren't with Cognizant in 2015, right?
No. Yeah. So I shared a link to the LA Times article with a coworker. So I was at work in January of this year at Cognizant, and I shared the link at work to a coworker, and he reported me. And HR told me that what I shared, literally a picture of me protesting, what I shared was advocating for violence and discriminatory in nature. And I didn't say anything. I just literally shared the link of the LA Times article showing me at a protest holding up a sign of people who were murdered by terrorists. That's all I did. So,
Wow. So you got reported. You the content moderator got moderated.
So, you know, especially those type of articles, whether or not you mention in them or whatever the case is, it can be offensive to other people. So it's a violation of our AUP. You cannot use our systems to promote certain things like that. You still violated the AUP policy
because I shared a link
by sharing an article that was discriminatory.
Can we talk a little bit about? Let's talk about Trump and the election meddling, because again, the hate that I see, which I think is the real virus, one of hate and fear, is so contagious. And I would bet that these people who are hating on Trump, many of them have not seen him speak at length. It's just infectious. Everybody hates Orange Man so much. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and that's something that my interview with Karlin Borisenko last week was very insightful. And she did a subsequent interview, maybe that same day, with a psychologist, and they talked about Trump derangement syndrome, and not in a bad way, just not in an attacking way, but just a literal, like, kind of mentality people have.
Yes.
And many people are escaping from that now. But the media and Facebook, they did not help, because we would get guidance from Facebook. Anything that Trump said was perceived as racist. So they'd say, hey, Trump's giving a speech later today. He's going to be discussing immigration. Watch out for any hate speech or attacks towards immigrants. So they would train us to be on the lookout for any hate speech. So if you're getting that guidance from Facebook, as a moderator, you're going to be on guard and flagging content more that's related to, Trump supporters, because they're going to be talking about immigration.
And hating on Trump, though, was A-okay?
I mean, there were a lot of instances of, attacks on Trump. So one example I want to give is, they tried to allow some political speech. So the example they gave is, if on Facebook I call Mary, you call me a Trump humper. So Ryan's a Trump humper. And if I see that comment that is directed towards me and I directly report it, that gives the moderator more latitude to take down posts. So let's say that you call me a Trump humper, I report it. Even if I directly report it, it stays up. It stays on the platform. Now the same thing would apply to if you called someone a Biden humper or a Clinton humper. Now, but here's the tricky thing. If I call someone a snowflake, if you call me a snowflake, which is a term that you use to attack people on the left, if you call me a snowflake, I report it, gets taken down, deleted. And if
Isn't it also for millennials? Yeah. Is it?
I think snowflake. So millennial. I don't know. Millennial, of course, is not a derogatory term, but snowflake is used quite a bit. I think. Is it used to refer to millennials as well?
I've seen millennials being called because they're quite fragile, although arguably they have no problems picking up a brick and using it during the BLM riots. But okay, so snowflake not allowed.
Snowflake. not allowed. If you call someone a feminazi, not allowed. But if you call someone a Nazi, that's a-okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure lots of people are being called white nationalist Nazis because you cannot stand up for I mean, I just had someone on Facebook call me a racist. I'm brown. What are you talking about? I'm white, brown, Egyptian, North Africa, Greek. It's like bazonkers. It's the again, the amount of hate is what made me, just see ya, bye. I don't want to be associated with all this hatred towards one man who's actually, if you listen to him, who's calling out Antifa and anarchists and trying to stand up. It's not the Democrats.
Right. And normally Facebook, speaking of Antifa, I mean, normally Facebook classifies organized groups that commit crimes. They label them as a criminal organization. So under that policy, dangerous individuals and organizations, we have, criminal, we have the Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, various gangs throughout the U.S., the Crips, the Bloods. So there's a specific post I have where Facebook spells out, this was a couple of years ago, hey, there's these protests planned, coordinated across multiple cities, and they said there's unconfirmed links that these protests are associated with Antifa, but Facebook clarified that Antifa is not a hate group, according to their own definition. So once again, we see them giving them exceptions. We see them favoring one side over the other. I mean, even as far as nationalism, there's a black nationalist in the early 20s named Marcus Garvey, and he was advocating for segregation. He was very extreme, essentially racist, because he was advocating for segregation. And many of the civil rights leaders at the time did not, thought he was too extreme. So he's often quoted nowadays and referenced by Black Lives Matter. And I actually saw a post with referencing Marcus Garvey, a quote that seemed very racist, and I raised it up. But Marcus Garvey is not on the hate figure list, but other white nationalists are, like League of the South, rightly so. I think some of these groups are on that list, but the black nationalist gets excluded from the list, is not taken down.
And I mean, I know some Bernie friends that are Bernie supporters or on the left, that when I told them, well, Antifa's actually fascist, they're hypocrites, and they thought I was nuts for saying that. I mean, I guess even today still, with everything that's happening as the country is set on fire and we're defacing. So
let's stay on Antifa there real quick, because you mentioned that we were going to talk about the flag.
Logo. Yeah.
So this is something I haven't mentioned anywhere else, but this is fascinating. So the Antifa flag is actually, the Antifa flag is violating. I mean, it's so in the hate group deck, we have the Antifa flag, the Germany. It's from Germany, so we have, I don't speak German, but there's the same flag was used by a group in Germany, like an anti-fascist group in Germany, and it's the exact same flag that's used by Antifa here in the U.S. Yet Antifa is not violating despite using that same emblem. So.
Yeah, may you send me that image? Did you see the image I sent you which seemed to be similar, of supposedly, there's word that Buckingham Palace is closed down. We haven't seen the Queen, and there's this new king, and that logo. It seemed like there's sevens, right? They're red and black. The Antifa.
I saw that image you sent me. I haven't seen that logo anywhere. So I don't know what that one's referencing. But there's all kinds of symbology in this hate figure list and these hate group lists. They all use different flags. So there are some openly racist groups in Europe, for example, that use different symbology. There's I think it's called the rising sun, or there's some kind of a sun symbol that's used. And that's the symbol right above. So on the chart I'm looking at, and I'll see if I can share this with you. You have the Alternative Nationale Strasburger, which is a hate group, and it has that rising sun symbol. I think it was used in Nazi Germany. And then just below that is the entry for this anti-fascist group that uses the same flag as Antifa.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really fascinating to see that Antifa, nothing is done against them, even though we know they're highly organized, but the media, continues to ignore that fact.
They're highly organized, and I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars they're raising under the guise of Black Lives Matter and where that money is going. Like, for instance, I don't know if, Darnella Fisher was supposedly the 17-year-old who caught some of the George Floyd footage. Well, they put up a GoFundMe, and last I checked, she had raised $500,000. She says it's not her. The organizer says she's working with her mother, and that it's legitimate just because it's GoFundMe and Twitter, which doesn't mean anything to me personally. I mean, GoFundMe, I know you have a campaign on GoFundMe. They banned me, they banned Zach, and I know that they have ties to pharmaceuticals. So it doesn't mean anything that if they're legitimate. So
yeah. And then something I want to touch on as well, because we've talked a lot about Antifa, we've talked about Trump, how attacks on Trump are allowed. And we didn't even get to touch on the image of Trump slitting his throat, or his throat being slit. But I do want to get into talk about abortion, fetuses, because I feel like this is something maybe you are more on the left or more centrist, and this might be an issue that's important to you. And so we had specific guidance on how to treat fetuses, and fetuses were not considered human according to Facebook's policy. So we had this Q&A section in our tool here. We kind of had like a mini Facebook tool, and we could ask questions. And so someone asked, is advocating on killing babies' fetuses in an abortion context considered violence and incitement per that policy?
Yeah.
Or would it be an ignore since they're referencing fetuses?
Yeah.
And it says the answer is advocating for killing babies / fetuses in an abortion context should be ignored. Like, this is unbelievable. And so
unbelievable. I'd like to share with you where I stand with that, because I do believe we shouldn't be bringing all the babies into this world if someone is raped, when you learn one about Planned Parenthood and the fact that they're selling these fetuses and profiting. Second, that they're using fetuses, fetal line as a substrate to grow their vaccines. So they're using fetuses to grow their vaccines to then inject back into the baby. So it's a very sustainable model for them.
We must also examine another motivation of Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry: the desire to make money to further their cause. Money is made selling sex education, selling contraceptives they know will fail millions of times a year, then selling abortions to take care of the failures, at times selling the baby parts that come from those abortions. It is easy to see that the abortion industry is an endless cycle of making money. It is only when women plan on parenthood that the abortion industry loses.
And when you realize also there were some abstinence programs that the CDC that were effective, teaching abstinence, and they were not welcome. They were shut down, even though they were shown to be successful to lower procreation. So and then you find out that Bill Gates is a eugenicist tied in. His dad worked for Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger was a known racist and eugenicist.
What's in a name? Sometimes people wonder why Margaret Sanger chose the name Planned Parenthood for her organization. Initially, Planned Parenthood was called the Birth Control League. People thought the word control was too intimidating, too threatening. And so they said, let's make it sound like something nice, Planned Parenthood. So when people look for us, they think we want to help them plan something that's good for them. So therefore, we have the name Planned Parenthood. How deceptive. Planned Parenthood helps people through the influence of Margaret Sanger, its founder, to sterilize people, to abort babies, to murder babies, and to hurt women. Planned Parenthood performs the lion's share of abortions in America, all under the name of something that sounds so helpful: Planned Parenthood.
Margaret Sanger said that she wanted to rid the world of human weeds, and the Nazis said exactly the same thing: life unworthy of life. She was a racist and eugenicist, and the purpose of her organization, which was originally called the American Birth Control League, was summed up by one of its mastheads on the Birth Control Review, which was to breed a race of thoroughbreds. Another one of the mastheads was birth control, a sure light in our racial darkness. One of the people who sat on her board, one of her most trusted advisors, was Lothrop Stoddard, who wrote a book in 1922 called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. And in it, he said that crossings with the Negro are always fatal.
Margaret Sanger, when she started the American Birth Control League and later Planned Parenthood, had an agenda, a eugenic agenda, to quote-unquote get rid of the inferior races.
Planned Parenthood today refuses to admit that Margaret Sanger is a racist.
Then you start thinking a little bit differently, and then what you just said, you can see, I can see now, because let's say even like a year and a half ago when people were like, I'm pro-life, I was like, what's wrong with these people? Don't they stand for your body, your choice? But now, I have a more of a definition on the how deep this goes.
Yeah, and it's the commercialization of fetuses essentially, and it's funny because they're saying your body, your choice, in the abortion, in the pro-choice movement, but when it comes to masks, you don't have a choice. You have to wear a mask no matter what, right?
Right. The irony.
And another post here about referencing abortion, another clarification. They said, hey team, just a reminder, we learned from the Facebook team that abortions are not considered violent death, so they would not be a part of graphic violence section 7 or 8. Abortions are not covered either under cruel and insensitive for premature death. So, I mean, the logic here is just kind of dumbfounding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who are the number one aborted fetuses? They're Black lives, because they matter, because they give them money. That's why they care about Black lives.
Exactly.
So when did you like, okay, I have enough information, and now I'm going to come out?
Yeah, so Project Veritas aided me in that process. We tried to find something that was newsworthy, that would be relevant to the U.S. market, obviously the average person in the U.S. There were some things that to me were very important, like the abortion issue was very important, but to reach the largest audience possible, to go a little more mainstream, there were certain things we wanted to, they chose to publish. So, yeah, I couldn't publish everything, obviously, but they made some decisions along the way. Project Veritas did, and they were the ones that ultimately published the video. But yeah, there were times when we weren't sure if we had enough good, video segments to publish, and the interview with HR, the interview with HR was a surprise. So I did not expect that, and it actually turned out to be a big part of the story, because I was targeted and punished at work for being a conservative and for sharing an example of me exercising my First Amendment.
AUP policy states that you cannot send or use cognizant or client internal systems to send discriminatory, racial.
Was the LA Times one? The Los Angeles Times where it had an image of me during a protest in 2015?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? About your own censorship or prosecution, in a sense, for being a conservative?
Yeah, so it wasn't something where it was very openly, I didn't openly feel the hostility, but when I transferred in July of 2019, I transferred from the Spanish team to the North American team, because there was a lot of turnover on the North American side, so they needed people to fill seats. So when I transferred to that side, it was a different dynamic. On the Spanish side, I was one of two white people, one of two gringos, And I got along really well with the Spanish side, the Hispanics. And then I went to the North American side, and it was more diverse in general. But I did notice people who were, pretty openly liberal. So in the video, you see, my coworkers talking about how, they didn't agree with me, or they stopped being friends with me because I was conservative. So there's a group of 2 or 3 of us who were more conservative who kind of hung out together. So yeah, it was something that was kind of, people talked behind their backs about. I didn't really see openly, but once we interviewed and talked to my coworkers, they did reveal that I was, discriminated against. And now I did apply for a promotion a couple of times, and I applied to work with the policy team, and the policy team interfaces directly with Facebook. So it's very possible that they didn't promote me to the policy team because they didn't want a conservative interfacing via video conference on a daily basis with Facebook.
It's like, and who, these, you can argue that these labels, left, right, it's all to divide and conquer, because you can also say that the left is not the right. Because from a Canadian perspective, when I started getting into politics, because I've always focused more on food politics, and then when I started seeing the amount of hate, I was always like, well, it's like the left is the right and the right is the left, and these labels don't make sense to me, and they're just divisive. So how would you define you being conservative in this day and age?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because nowadays on Facebook we see echo chambers, and Facebook does this intentionally. They put people with the same kind of ideologies together. Echo chambers, whether you're on the right or the left, are bad. You look at Mike Cernovich. Mike Cernovich always criticizes a lot of Trump supporters because, let's be honest, sometimes they do kind of just parrot what everybody else is saying. So thinking independently and staying away from those echo chambers is important, wherever you lie on the political spectrum. So me as a conservative, I grew up Republican. Now I would say I'm more libertarian. I'm all about letting the people choose, having less government involvement. So, and that's the issue that comes up when we're talking about how to solve the problem at Facebook, how to stop them from censoring conservatives. Maybe some antitrust legislation might work, but then the question becomes, well, do we need more government involvement with Facebook? And I'm pretty opposed to that to a certain extent, because I'm more of a libertarian. So those are some of my political views. I'm pretty pro-life, but as well as you, I believe that in cases of rape or incest, there should be some exceptions made. And as far as gun rights, I'm really big about gun rights. I live in Arizona, so fortunately we have the opportunity to defend ourselves. But so those are some of the biggest issues. And immigration, and I lived in Mexico City, and there's some great opportunities for people coming across the border. But the problem is, you've got a worldwide economy, a lot of great talented people in other countries who can't come to the U.S. because somebody else already took their place, somebody who crossed the border illegally without papers. So those are my stances on a few of the big issues.
You can also argue, Ryan, as far as the influx of refugees in, let's say, Europe, that it was purposely done to help destroy the fabric of the culture. And I think the most important thing is to be, especially if you're supposedly democratic, to have open discourse and be committed to learning and having a diversity. And it's like, I would have never thought a year ago even that I would be defending Tucker Carlson. And I think he does such amazing reports. And I have a friend, a colleague who makes one of our products, and he watched it Fox, and I would be like, and he was a Trump supporter, but I was still his friend. I was still his friend, and it wasn't so divisive. And now it seems like again, to comment on that Facebook post that I made, being called a racist. They were even talking about me on my own damn post in the third person, saying we've lost another one to the darkness. Are you kidding?
Yeah. You're right about one thing. They're using that strategy of divide and conquer, the divisiveness to destroy this country, tear it apart, and it benefits the elites. Like the elites benefit at the end of the day, no matter what. So I really think if you talk to your average American citizen, like the average American citizen is not racist. The average Trump supporter is not racist, but the media would like you to believe that. And right now, it's I saw a post from Zach the other day, or just maybe today, how it's from here on out until the election. It's full court press. Yeah, it's only going to get crazier. So they're pulling out all the stops. They're going to try everything they can. And Facebook's working in lockstep with the media to do that. But one last example that's really ironic. This I haven't revealed anywhere else. There was a post guidance given to us on October 17th of 2019, and this was right before a speech that Mark Zuckerberg was going to give, a live speech at Georgetown University. So he's giving a speech about freedom of expression. Okay, the irony is just incredible. And so in the post, I said, hey, he's giving the speech. He'll underscore the company's commitment to giving people a voice, yada, yada, yada. And then he says he'll talk about the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. And then it says risk and response and NA markets have been partnering on risk mitigation steps in partnership with product teams. But due to the nature of this commentary, we may see escalations or an increase in user reports of hate speech, and wanted to provide a heads up on this. Please reach out with any indication of an increase in user reports or in volume. So basically, Facebook's like, hey, Zuckerberg's going to give a speech about freedom of expression. Because of the speech, we expect to see an uptick in hate speech. So be on the lookout so we can delete more comments, right? Like that is the biggest irony I've ever witnessed. Yeah.
Wow. So Zuckerberg is married to a Chan. We are seeing arguably the ushering in of a China light of communism. Who is calling the shots? There's some, obedient employees, because even now under this Rona, you just hear over and over again, I'm just doing my job. I have to spray these chemicals that are irritants to the lungs to kill this virus that attacks the lungs. It's just moronic. I'm just doing my job, and I understand people want to save their jobs. But how about doing your job as a human being to call out the idiocracy of what is going on?
Who's calling the shots? I mean, if you look at the Facebook policy team, I had a conversation with one of my supervisors, and she used to be doing, she was working at Cognizant, and she was on a team that had to video conference on a daily basis with Facebook policy. And so at the top at Facebook, there's about 6 or 7 people who decide the policy for the entire company. And so, I mean, when you have such a powerful company and such a few people in charge of so much of what's on the internet and what's on Facebook, that's a dangerous thing to have.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is Mark Zuckerberg in lieu with China. I don't know. What I do know is, I mean, there's examples of it on the right, even like Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell's wife has these close ties to China, and she's involved in a government position as well, and he's the Senate Majority Leader. Yeah. So, I mean, I call it him all the time. I call out Mitch McConnell for that conflict of interest. So I don't know what Mark Zuckerberg's conflict of interest is. I mean, a lot of it I think is how do they not lose money, or how do they stay profitable? So they might be trying to work both sides, but it's clear that the societal influences from the left are much stronger, and they're kowtowing politically to the left, and they're trying to push this agenda. So it's clear there's an agenda. It's clear there's bias from Zuckerberg, from Zuckerberg's company. So the key question is, what he testified to in April 2018, that they don't censor political speech. Is that accurate? Did he lie to Congress? That's the question we need to be asking. So if I'm called to testify, I mean, obviously I've witnessed firsthand the contrary, and what I've witnessed is a stark contrast to what he testified about.
I want to touch upon, as we wrap it up, on the vaccines, but first, like, what do you hope to accomplish with this act of bravery of coming forth? Certainly, it's all the social media platforms, and certainly the free speech is not alive and well. So what can we talk about amending Section 230? We talk about whether these are platforms or publishers.
Mm-hmm.
What would be a best case scenario? Would you see yourself testifying in Congress like Dr. Robert Epstein has?
Yeah, I see myself testifying in Congress, definitely. A solution is hard to come by. I mean, there's some antitrust legislation. There's the Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So in that law that was written in 1996, the intent was to preserve a free and competitive marketplace. Now, the internet has changed so dramatically in the last 20 years, and really Facebook, Google, YouTube, they have a monopoly in the internet, within the internet. And so as far as solutions go, I mean, we want to take away some of the privileges that Facebook enjoys as a platform, because they're basically interposing themselves between the user and their freedoms that they have, freedom of speech. So they're not being a good Samaritan, and that phrase is actually, that wording is what's actually in the law, good Samaritan. So that law allowed for Facebook to act as an intermediary and block certain things that were offensive. So they're abusing that. So we should maybe rewrite that law to not give them so much leeway, based on how the current internet landscape is. And so that's one possible solution, but it's a tough one because they have so much influence and power at this time. I would compare it to the railroad tycoons of the 19th century, or Dale Carnegie, the steel monopoly. So it's going to be an uphill battle, and depending on what happens in November with Congress or with the Senate seats, it's going to be tough to do anything about Facebook at this point. I think we've waited a little bit too long. It's going to be tough.
And lawsuits have been already lost. Many who have tried to take, whether it's Facebook or Google or whatnot, they lose. And you can even argue that the lawyers who take on the cases purposely just burn them in some cases.
Yeah.
And do you think that Facebook, as other like Google, will be meddling in this coming election? I mean, they're already trying to push for mail-in voting, and Google has a patent on online voting if they wanted to do that. Everything else is pushing towards this Internet of Things, online virtual world. So how do you see, we have 4 months, we can all probably agree that the Rona is in part to Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we already see them interfering. We've seen them interfere a lot in the past. And a great example is this past fall, the phrase civil war was trending. So this is during the impeachment proceedings, and people were saying, hey, well, if Trump gets impeached, we're going to have a civil war. So how seriously do you take these statements online? But I literally raised this trend up to my supervisor, the policy manager, and he said, hey, that's great. We definitely want to know what's going on. Thank you for that. I'm going to give these jobs, raise up this trend to Facebook to see what they can do. And he even told me, he's like, hey, if Facebook had known this was happening in 2016, they would have done things to prevent it. So, I mean, prevent what? Like a civil war? So if a patriot is saying, hey, I'm going to overthrow a tyrannical government, like technically that would violate their policy. Because if you're calling for violence as due to the results of an election, that violates their policy. So at what point are they interfering so much in domestic affairs that they're preventing patriots from defending their country? So I think there's a lot to come. I think they're definitely doing things behind the scenes. I was an entry-level employee, and I saw that's how much I saw. I saw so much going on at an entry-level role. So you can imagine higher up with engineers and up at the top at Facebook, they're probably doing a lot more.
I'm curious your thoughts on why is it that they hate this man so much? And the people who hate him, I mean, I've not seen a president. I mean, I watched every single day almost, like after I do interview with you, I'm going to go watch President Trump. I'm watching too because I'm picking up, I'm really trying to figure out, is he playing 5D chess? Is it all political theater? And when you learn that the CDC pays its employees to watch soap operas, I wonder. But where does this, it is infectious, because I would argue that these people who hate on Trump, like I had a friend that I've known since 16 say, I'd rather vote for a donkey. But I bet you haven't listened to President Trump. And from, at least even if it's a role, he's the one who's speaking about preserving our country.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, if you take a step back and look at the whole issue holistically, and you look at how much they hate Trump, I mean, it's nothing more than a psyops campaign. I mean, it's a very successful psyops campaign to influence the minds of voters. Now, conservatives had a lot of hate for Obama. Let's be honest. During those 8 years, there was a lot of anti-Obama material. I don't think it was as extreme as the hate for Trump. I think with Obama, like you'd listen to him, we did recognize he was a good speaker, good public speaker.
Yeah, suave.
But I think that's the stark contrast that we love about Trump, is he's so blunt and to the point. And he's like kind of the anti-politician. And you spoke of, speaking of infectious, how infectious that, Trump derangement syndrome, how much the hate is on Trump. I wanted to get into real quick before we leave, talking about vaccines and whatnot. And we see a lot of the control that social media has on what we can see online. I tried to share the hashtag expose Facebook the other day, but I also was trying to share a link to a study about COVID where basically they said, yes, COVID is real, but they haven't isolated it sufficiently, and for the vaccine or whatever, or even the tests they administer are not isolated sufficiently. Now, I do have an example of where Facebook talked about polio and the polio vaccine and vaccines in general. So they made an exception. They said, hey, there's this claim that the anti-polio campaign is a CIA Zionist Indian conspiracy to infect children with compromised polio vaccine.
Okay.
So they're claiming that. If you're saying that it's a conspiracy, that the anti-polio campaign is a conspiracy, then Facebook said to delete any posts that mention that. And this was temporary guidance for about a couple of weeks. But yeah, Facebook has signed off on an exception to delete at scale content suggesting the following: claims that the anti-polio campaign is a CIA/Zionist/Indian conspiracy to infect children with compromised polio vaccine. So if you say that, and that the anti-polio campaign is a conspiracy, then that gets deleted. Over my 2 years there, I also documented some of the policy related to anti-vaccination.
Yes.
So that was documented. I mean, I filmed it, and it wasn't something we actively actioned. We didn't enforce that policy, but they did have a policy there. Maybe another team elsewhere actioned or actively enforced that policy. I did not. But it specifically spelled out like types of phrases that are allowed, types of phrases that are not allowed when it comes to discussing anti-vax.
Well, they've taken down closed Facebook groups. I mean, they purposely call us anti-vax. I don't like the word anti. I like pro-medical freedom.
Yeah.
And these are closed groups that are now no more.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely censorship towards that. You could argue that these global elitists have not vaccinated their children, and so that's a very polarizing, especially now as we face, screw the placebo trials, forget the animals, just straight guinea pigging into humans. Vaccines usually take 8 to 10 years to develop, and then they're still not safe. And now we're crazy talking about a year and a half when the first trials have gone wrong. Like I just read this article today in the Lancet saying that they went, okay, well, I don't believe you, Lancet, because you just published fraudulent data on hydrochloroquine. So you've lost credibility to me. And you hear on Facebook people parroting and saying, trust the science, this is scientism, trust this expert. None of these experts have once talked about the immune system. How about our immune system?
Yeah.
So maybe.
And that's the What were you going to say? Oh yeah, that's the beauty of the internet. I mean, the beauty of the internet is you can research different things, you can find different sources, you can share those sources. So Facebook and Google and the powers that be are trying to censor what we can talk about online. And so I mean, there's a lot of research that's not being published, is not being promoted, and these lies that the media is perpetrating about hey, there's a rise in COVID tests in Florida, and every single of the 300 sites had 100% infection rate. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are getting censored.
We do not want to become the arbiters of truth. I think that would be a bad position for us to be in, and not what we should be doing. But on specific claims, if someone is going to go out and say that hydroxychloroquine is proven to cure COVID, when in fact it has not been proven to cure COVID, and that statement could lead people to take a drug that in some cases, some of the data suggests that it might be harmful to people, we think that we should take that down.